I arrived in my hometown close to midnight, concluding a week-long road trip across the outskirts of my sales territory. Working for a major multinational pharmaceutical company, my role involved ensuring that medical professionals in my area recommended our products above others. Every 6 weeks, I spent a week away from home, covering my territory diligently. My days were filled with visits to various doctors' offices, promoting our products and leaving samples where welcomed. I emphasized the unique qualities of our brands compared to generic alternatives. It was a numbers game. Typically, only 1 out of every 6 stops allowed direct interaction with a doctor. Most often, I found myself speaking with head nurses or designated staff. My wife and I aimed to reduce our debts before starting a family. Departing on Sunday to begin the week on site, I had exceeded my weekly quota by Thursday at 7 p.m. when I submitted my daily reports. Recognizing my exceptional performance, the regional sales manager instructed me to return home and enjoy an extra day off with pay. My consistent high achievements, especially from after-hours visits, were finally gaining recognition. During these trips, I extended my hours by visiting doctors' units after regular business hours. Though it didn't always increase visibility significantly, documenting these visits in my reports made a substantial impact. This strategy allowed me direct access to more doctors, particularly during quiet periods when I could engage in meaningful discussions about new developments, product benefits, and potential medication interactions. Establishing these personal connections earned me considerable respect among field physicians. Most colleagues overlooked these after-hours visits, considering them redundant. However, I found them to be the most effective way to engage doctors directly, as these times often catered to walk-in patients and provided opportunities for focused conversations. Perhaps my drive stemmed from being the youngest and newest member of the sales team. On occasion, I skipped lunch to maximize my contacts, relying on my interpersonal skills to foster rapport effortlessly. If I ever wanted to cheat on my wife, there were ample opportunities, especially when I was on the road. Every town and location seemed to offer someone new, eager for attention, and drawn to those who appeared successful. In my professional circles, I was nicknamed the Artful Dodger because I could deftly navigate delicate situations without causing hurt feelings, always ensuring others felt respected. Growing up, I witnessed my mother's regular infidelities towards my father during my teenage years. My siblings and I were aware of her actions and the man involved, along with his reputation. I saw the emotional toll it took on my father during our runs together. He felt trapped yet conflicted due to his sense of responsibility towards us children, which kept him in a loveless marriage. I knew he would eventually take action when the time was right. My mother treated my father poorly, which influenced me deeply. I vowed never to emulate her behavior and consciously avoid hurting others. One night, our tensions erupted, and I confronted her bluntly, calling her out for what she was. She retorted that my father lacked the courage to leave her because he loved her too much. I warned her that her own words might come back to haunt her. My father eventually found his liberation. As soon as I, the last of his children, graduated from high school, he enacted his revenge. They claimed it was an accident, but I remain unconvinced to this day. I believe the incident transformed his love into hatred, empowering him to seek retribution. The climax came when my father caught my mother with her long-term lover, who was also her employer. In a heated confrontation, he demanded an end to their relationship in all respects. Shortly after their separation and just days before the divorce proceedings were to begin, my mother and her lover met a tragic end. They had intended to dine at an exclusive restaurant atop a cliff overlooking the Mississippi River, a new hotspot for the elite. However, due to faulty GPS directions in her lover's car, they missed the restaurant by a block and drove off the cliff in the darkness during a storm. The police investigation deemed it an accident, overlooking the possibility that my father, skilled in coding, could have manipulated the GPS to fail. Her parents and extended family had a heated discussion with my father about how to handle her funeral arrangements. He insisted on cremation and nothing more, leading to a major argument. To support his stance, he revealed the true nature of her relationship with the man she passed away with, providing video evidence where she herself admitted to the affair and expressed disparaging views about her husband and children. Upon hearing these revelations directly from her, her family began to understand and appreciate my father's perspective. They decided to bury her quietly under her maiden name, acknowledging the truth that had surfaced. Even her own family lost respect for her after my father exposed her true feelings. The death notice appeared discreetly in the paper after the arrangements were finalized. Returning home, I noticed a strange car parked in our driveway, prompting suspicion due to my parents' troubled relationship. Parking nearby, I approached the darkened house cautiously. Using my cell phone flashlight, I confirmed my wife's car was present, meaning the unfamiliar vehicle had no legitimate reason to be there at such a late hour. Checking the plates revealed they were local. Entering the house, I discovered the security system was off, a departure from our usual routine prompted by my wife's childhood trauma of a break-in. Retrieving my shotgun and loading a single shell, I ascended the stairs to find the master bedroom door wide open. Inside, they lay asleep, exhausted from their recent lovemaking, bathed in the light of a nightstand lamp. The scene reeked of sex and blood, the large man sprawled atop my wife. I retreated to the living room, grappling with what to do next. Should I confront them, perhaps even resort to the drastic action my father had taken? After much contemplation, I realized that as infuriating as their betrayal was, I couldn't risk my freedom and future by acting rashly. Their actions were reprehensible, but I couldn't justify a lifetime in jail for their mistakes. So, I quietly left the house, leaving them undisturbed. Some betrayals cut deep, but preserving my own future meant walking away from vengeance that could only bring ruin. I quietly dialed 911, explaining that I had returned home to find an unknown man apparently asleep after assaulting my wife. The officer on the line asked why I believed it was assault, to which I pointed out the blood-soaked bedsheets. I requested they send the police through the unlocked front door. After ending the call, I heard sirens approaching in the distance. Returning upstairs, I fired the shotgun into the ceiling, scattering drywall dust over everyone as they startled awake to find me pointing the gun at them. Both Jeannie, my wife, and Doug Drysdale were shocked to see me. It was a tense moment. For now, I suggest we all remain silent, I said calmly. The police are on their way. I'm not a large man, standing at 5'9" and weighing around 160 pounds with a slim build from years of track and field. Jeannie, my wife, was petite at 5'6" and about 110 pounds, with a job as an executive assistant. We met in university and had been married for 2 years. I loved her deeply, and this betrayal blindsided me. Doug Drysdale, the man with Jeannie, stood at 6'3" and weighed around 250 pounds, muscular and imposing. He was also my superior at work and widely regarded as unpleasant. The situation was grim. Jeannie appeared to have been menstruating, leaving the sheets stained with blood. It certainly didn't look like consensual sex at first glance. When the police arrived and entered our home, they called out my name and I directed them to the master bedroom. They entered cautiously, guns drawn, prepared for the worst. They instructed me to lower my shotgun, which I did immediately. One of the officers kicked the shotgun away and then cuffed me, instructing me to place my hands behind my back. I complied, and they escorted me to the living room to await the completion of their investigation. Meanwhile, one officer called for an ambulance as it was clear Jeannie needed medical attention. I could sense their suspicion, likely wondering if I had acted out in a fit of rage and harmed her. The police officer apprehended the naked man, allowing him to put on his pants before placing him in the cruiser, captured live by the news team's camera. Meanwhile, Jeannie, my wife, was filmed being loaded into an ambulance, clearly still bleeding, which drew significant media attention. As the situation unfolded, a female detective arrived and assumed control of the investigation. After speaking with the officers processing the scene, she approached me. Despite being cuffed, she led me back into the master bedroom and asked for my account of the events. I recounted discovering them together and firing the shotgun into the ceiling to confront them. Inspecting the shotgun, the detective noted it was loaded with only one shell, commending my intention to scare rather than harm. She emphasized that given my smaller stature compared to Doug Drysdale, it was a plausible action to regain control of the situation and refute any intent to cause harm. Upon seeing the blood and considering the circumstances, she expressed aloud that she understood why I reported it as rape. I provided a detailed explanation of the evening's events and offered my supervisor's contact information, which she verified with a phone call. Thankfully, my supervisor confirmed my unexpected return home due to an off day earned from earlier work performance. The detective noted the timing verified by credit card transactions and the fact I was still in professional attire. Jeannie's torn clothing further supported my account, and all items were collected as evidence. After removing the cuffs, the detective advised me to find a hotel for the night and contact them the next day for further instructions. I informed her I would head to the hospital to handle medical forms and insurance details. Walking back to my company car together, she handed me her business card. Upon inspecting my car's trunk, she remarked on the ease of verifying my statement with my belongings still packed, saving time and effort in the investigation. I rushed to the emergency room where I learned Jeannie would undergo surgery to repair severe damage to her large intestine from what the doctors suspected was forced anal penetration. The doctor indicated to the police officer assigned to her case that the extent of internal injuries suggested she had not consented due to the intense pain, making it increasingly likely a serious case of anal rape. The surgery lasted 6 hours to mend numerous tears in her intestine, and she would need to remain face down for a week while healing. Heavy medication kept her largely unconscious, delaying any chance of getting her account of what happened. The trauma meant she'd be on a liquid diet for the next week, with any strain risking further bleeding. Leaving the hospital after 9 a.m., I was relieved to hear the surgery had been successful, though there was concern about potential internal bleeding needing further intervention if it persisted. Back home, I read in the morning paper that Jeannie and Doug were identified in what was now considered a potential rape case, not an attempted murder as initially feared. The female detective had outlined the basic facts, confirming an ongoing investigation. While reading, my supervisor called, expressing the chaos caused by media attention and revelations from other salesmen's wives. It seemed our boss had allegedly used scheduling to exploit women, prompting widespread concern and confusion at our head office. "Colin, it's a mess," Lucas said. "Other wives are coming forward, and the head office is in panic mode. We've been advising our staff to have their spouses report everything to the police." "Thanks for the update, Lucas," I replied. "But we still don't have all the facts. What seems like rape could still be claimed as consensual. Without evidence of a struggle and with Doug unharmed, it could turn into a he said, she said situation. If charges aren't pressed, I'll be resigning. I won't work for someone who's made a mockery of my marriage." "Don't make any rash decisions, Colin," Lucas responded calmly. "I'll relay your concerns to human resources along with everything else I've uncovered. You're likely not the only one feeling this way. Either way, his abuse of power and knowledge could land the company in serious legal trouble. I'm putting you on a week-long pre-approved medical leave to give you time to sort things out," Lucas continued reassuringly. "I'll keep you updated from here. We don't want to lose you over hasty decisions." I found a budget-friendly place near town and crashed on the bed fully clothed, exhausted from nearly 30 hours awake. When I woke at dusk, it took a moment to orient myself. After a quick shower and change, I checked my phone to find multiple missed calls and messages, one each from Jeannie's parents and my father, 2 from my boss with updates, and 2 from Detective Benton investigating the case. I dialed the detective first. "Hi, this is Colin McBride," I said. "Detective Benton, you were trying to reach me?" "Thanks for getting back to me," she replied. "Your supervisor mentioned you'd been up all night. I hope you got some rest." "I just woke up, actually." "Checked in around noon," I replied. "How can I help?" "I have a few questions for you, but more importantly, I have a lot to update you on. This has gotten more complex since the media coverage this morning. A lot of new information has surfaced, raising serious questions," Detective Benton explained. "I was just about to grab some dinner," I said. "Would it be okay if I pick up fast food and bring it to the station?" "Since I haven't eaten either, and you're not a suspect, how about we meet somewhere in an hour?" "I'll have time to freshen up," she suggested. "That sounds good. Where do you want to meet?" I asked. She provided a location. With time to spare, I called Lucas, and he answered promptly. "Hey Colin, did you talk to the detective yet?" he asked. "Meeting her in an hour to discuss everything," I replied. "Just got off the phone with her, and now I'm calling you." It looks like Doug Drysdale's days are numbered. Our legal counsel instructed HR to terminate his employment immediately for breaching the moral clauses in his contract, Lucas informed me. We've discovered 5 more sales reps whose wives were involved with Doug. Yours wasn't the only one. Mrs. Drysdale has already lawyered up and is going after him, Lucas continued. He'll be in serious trouble by the time she's done with him. They're moving fast, I remarked in surprise. I've been instructed to have all 6 of you report to the branch corporate office once things settle down, Lucas explained. For now, I'll be juggling both Doug's and my responsibilities here at the regional office. Understood, I replied. Am I still off next week? Yes, and longer if necessary, with full pay, Lucas confirmed. HR backed my decision and even commended it. Off the record, they're concerned about losing one of our top field reps. Your reports consistently bring in new locations and marketing opportunities, and your approach has significantly boosted sales volume in your area. I arrived at Olive Garden to find Detective Benton waiting. The dinner rush had passed, and we were seated at a semi-private table. I was surprised to see her out of uniform, dressed stylishly and clearly considering our meeting important. She looked impressive in her dress, and if she intended to make an impression, she succeeded. Detective Benton, with hints of her natural black hair beneath her blonde, was about my height and carried herself well. Had I been single, I might have been interested in where things could lead. I had opted for black dress pants, a soft yellow shirt, and a sports jacket, typical attire for work. Once seated, she updated me that toxicology had found no drugs in my wife's system. The possibility of a date rape drug being used is ruled out, making proving rape more challenging. Without the surgeons' and doctors' reports, we have little beyond the significant blood evidence on the mattress and sheets. 3 of the 5 women involved with Doug Drysdale have admitted to being coerced into ongoing relationships, she continued. Although no direct threats were made, implications were heavy. They only met him every 6 weeks on a Thursday night, and their memories are fragmented. It suggests there's a crucial aspect to this situation we're overlooking. The DA will consider Doug's power over their husbands' careers, she added. Each woman knew about the others, but kept silent to protect their husbands' jobs. They only saw Doug when their spouses were away, usually for just one night. It will give the district attorney more options when considering charges. The 3 women I interviewed believe they were pressured to try anal sex and had refused Doug Drysdale multiple times, although they can't be certain. They now feel relieved that they won't be manipulated by him anymore, if indeed they were. The DA has a lot to weigh before proceeding. Their statements seemed rehearsed and well thought out, as if they were coached on what to say. Despite the power and influence involved, they were all consenting adults of legal age, Detective Benton explained. This complicates the case for prosecution. If your wife said no, it's considered rape, Detective Benton emphasized. We can't question her until she's off her medication and able to provide her side of the story. Thank you for the information, Detective Benton, I replied. With what you've told me, I can now move forward as if my marriage is over, even if that one night went too far. If Jeannie had been honest about her intentions with me from the beginning of their relationship, I would have left my job. It's clear that something else attracted her to him over the long term. It implies she felt something was lacking in me that she found in him. Unfortunately, I may never know what or why. Detective Benton suddenly smiled broadly. Colin, if we're going to a first-name basis, call me Fiona. It turned out to be a pleasant dinner. We both preferred the unlimited salad over the pasta. Once the business was done, we relaxed and got to know each other. We didn't discuss my wife's situation for the rest of the meal. We wrapped up around 10, and as we left the restaurant, Fiona informed me that I could return home the next day. The forensic team had finished their work. Back at my motel, I called Jeannie's parents and shared what I knew about Doug Drysdale and Jeannie's relationship. According to the other women involved, Doug and Jeannie had been seeing each other regularly whenever I was out of town, starting about 6 months after I was hired. Both of them were shocked to learn that despite the events of the previous night possibly being rape, others believed Doug and Jeannie had been involved intimately for almost 2 years. I strongly recommended they contact their daughter to discuss where she wanted to live because I intended to file for divorce at the beginning of the week. When I spoke to my dad, he commended me for handling the situation professionally. He offered me a place to stay until I sorted things out, which I said I would consider. I went to church on Sunday morning, something I hadn't done in years. I slipped in just before the service began, clutching the Bible I had borrowed from my motel room. My grandfather, though not religious, would sometimes turn to the Bible for answers when he had none. I figured, why not give it a shot? If it worked for him, maybe it could for me too. The preacher's sermon centered on forgiveness and letting go. He emphasized the importance of forgiving oneself for allowing situations to happen. It was a perspective I hadn't considered before hearing it. As I was leaving the church and heading towards my car to go home and start cleaning up, Fiona spotted me. She was talking to an older couple and the minister. "Colin, what a pleasant surprise," Fiona greeted me. "Come meet my parents." I walked over and introduced myself. Fiona introduced me as a friend, and her father asked how I found the service. This sparked a brief discussion between us about forgiveness, surprising Fiona with my freely expressed viewpoint. The pastor didn't say it outright, but he got me thinking, if we haven't forgiven ourselves, can we truly say we've forgiven the others involved, even if we've told them we have? I mused aloud. Fiona's father chuckled. "Fiona, your friend not only listens but discerns as well. The question he's raised will linger with me all day." "Perhaps you should be writing my sermons," the pastor chimed in. "Your perspective has challenged me to revisit the essence of forgiveness in a deeper way. I hope you'll visit us again. Questioning my teachings helps me grow." Fiona and her parents invited me to join them for lunch, but I declined, explaining that I never ate a big meal before a long run. Fiona asked where I was headed, and I mentioned the university's track field, a mile-long loop where I planned to jog 3 to 4 times, maybe more. I hadn't initially planned to run, but now I felt compelled. It took about an hour to reach the track. As I set my bag down and prepared for my first run, I saw Fiona approaching, dressed in a track outfit with a headband like mine. We ran together, adjusting my pace so she could keep up. After 3 loops, she needed to stop, but I pushed for one more round, really working up a sweat. When I finished, I sat down and grabbed my water bottle, taking a long drink as Fiona began to speak. I headed home after my run and changed into blue jeans and a t-shirt. Moving my belongings into the spare bedroom, I started cleaning up the mess. While downstairs gathering garbage bags, I heard a knock at the door. It was Jeannie's parents. They were visibly upset, having just visited Jeannie at the hospital, where she was still heavily sedated. My dad helped me haul the mattress and box springs out of the house, while my mother-in-law bagged up the sheets for disposal. They had come to collect Jeannie's clothes and personal items. Together, we packed everything carefully. I reassured them that I didn't hold them responsible for what happened. As we worked, I explained what I had learned so far about the situation. Sharing everything helped them understand my feelings better, though like me, they couldn't comprehend Jeannie's actions. We agreed there was much more to uncover. After they left, I vacuumed the house, using the time to reflect. Something about the whole situation didn't make sense to me. I wandered over to Jeannie's cluttered makeup table. She never went anywhere without her makeup, yet something caught my eye at the back of a drawer, a row of vials labeled as test samples of an unfamiliar pill-form drug. They were hidden deep, only discovered because I had pulled the drawer completely out. I immediately called Fiona. Within 15 minutes, the police were back at my house, photographing the evidence and its discovery. They also searched the master bathroom, where they found 2 empty vials inside the small wastebasket. Fiona arrived dressed similarly to me and immediately got to work with the police crew. I overheard her discussing the discovery of the vials. Fiona emphasized the need to prioritize identifying the drug and obtaining search warrants for the other women's homes from Judge Davidson. After the police left, Fiona made a quick phone call. "Grab your things, Colin, you're coming with me," Fiona said firmly. "Sitting here dwelling on this won't help. We're going to my parents' place. They've decided to have an impromptu barbecue for family, and you might find yourself roped into a game of volleyball." "Should I expect an interrogation from your family?" I asked as I locked up. "Wait and see," Fiona chuckled. "But first, let's swing by the grocery store so you can pick something up." At the store, I grabbed hot dogs and buns, and I also picked out a lovely vase of spring flowers for Fiona's mom. When I returned to the car, Fiona was pleased with the flowers. "These are for your mom," I explained, "a thank you for the invite, especially since I'm still married." We drove in silence for the most part, arriving to find several cars already there. We entered through the garage into the backyard, where the barbecue was in full swing. Fiona's mom was delighted with the flowers, noting it had been ages since she received any. We played 2 rounds of volleyball before switching to touch football. After the game, everyone teased Fiona for bringing in a ringer. I noticed a little girl sitting alone looking sad, so I sat down beside her. She was about 6 and had Down syndrome. Introducing myself, I saw her eyes light up as I sat on the grass. The group grew quiet as I told her a story about a lonely monarch butterfly that couldn't fly, feeling like it never would. By the end, she smiled, understanding that the butterfly needed time to build strength to spread its wings and let them dry. As we wrapped up, it was time to eat, and the little girl stayed close by my side. She asked why I only took a little of each dish. "I want to make sure I like it before going back for more," I whispered, making her giggle. Fiona's mother's neighbor approached, thanking me for making her granddaughter feel special. "She is special," I replied warmly. "It's up to us to understand how they relate to us and the world. To build a meaningful relationship with someone like her, we need an open mind and willingness to adapt." I kept quiet, seeing tears welling up in the woman's eyes. After dinner, I called my sister to tell her about the little girl I had met and suggested that her daughter meet her. My sister agreed, so I passed my cell phone to the little girl's grandmother. She lost her parents in a car accident a year ago. Her grandmother is overwhelmed and very protective, Fiona explained, listening in. "Who is she talking to on your cell?" "My sister, whose daughter is similar," I replied. "I thought they could both use a friend who understands." Fiona leaned in and gently kissed my cheek. Everyone noticed but said nothing. When we said goodnight, Fiona's mother thanked me for what I had done, having heard from her neighbor. "Colin, thank you for helping Elizabeth. She's thrilled to finally connect with someone who understands. They'll meet at the park tomorrow after school," she said. "We don't know what brought you two together, but we hope to see you again." Fiona dropped me off at home, and though I offered coffee, she declined, heading straight to work to gather more information. On Monday, I arranged for a construction team to repair the master bedroom ceiling and repaint the entire room. A dumpster arrived, into which I tossed the mattress and box spring. By day's end, I had scheduled an appointment with a divorce lawyer for midweek. Tuesday was spent filling the dumpster with items from the attic. Jeannie's father visited, expressing concern about healthcare costs. I assured him my insurance would cover her until the divorce was finalized, but she would be responsible for co-pays. Wednesday morning, after meeting with the divorce lawyer, Lucas called. "Colin, corporate security just informed me that the drug samples found with our sales associates' wives were provided by Doug," Lucas reported. "It's an experimental drug for dementia, but he used it for its side effects, extreme arousal, and diminished inhibitions. The dosage they were taking could make them compliant to anything. Without specific searching, the police wouldn't have found it. Based on that, it looks like Doug's in for a long prison sentence," I remarked. "He essentially provided them with a new form of date rape drug. But how did he get his hands on it? And what are the legal implications of using it on unsuspecting subjects? Was he an insider, part of the drug's testing phase without our knowledge?" "I honestly don't know, Colin," Lucas admitted. "I'll raise those questions with higher-ups to see if we can get answers." "They better have answers, because it seems like corporate was trying to cover themselves by firing Doug so quickly," I pointed out. After that conversation with Lucas, I felt compelled to contact Detective Benton. I requested her email address and texted her mine. Back home, I meticulously recounted the discussion with Lucas in an email and promptly sent it off. I followed up with a text urging her to check her email, indicating its potential importance. By mid-afternoon, I received a registered mail letter from Mrs. Douglas Drysdale requiring my signature. Inside was a request for a private meeting and her cell phone number. I called her, and we agreed to meet on Saturday afternoon at a secluded restaurant in Poplar Bluff. It struck me as odd that she chose such an obscure location. Meanwhile, contractors were busy fixing up the master bedroom on Thursday and Friday, and Jeannie was served divorce papers in her hospital room. Late Friday night, Fiona called to confirm our hiking plans for Saturday, but I explained my prior commitment and suggested meeting at the state park on Sunday morning at 10. Mrs. Drysdale, an exceptionally beautiful woman in her 40s, and I discussed our divorces over lunch. As we were parting ways, she handed me a legal-sized envelope. "Colin, Lucas mentioned the questions you raised about my husband's role within the corporation," Mrs. Drysdale explained. "Inside this envelope are confidential documents that will provide answers. I must remain in the background for reasons I cannot disclose. Please handle this information with utmost care. It could have serious repercussions, and certain parties will go to great lengths to protect themselves." After reading through the file in my car, I understood why she had taken such drastic measures to get this information to me. I called my father seeking advice on how to proceed. "Dad, I've come into possession of highly sensitive, damaging information," I explained. "It's a legal file revealing what was happening behind the scenes with Doug Drysdale and our company. It paints a disturbing picture." "Are you at home?" my dad asked. "No, I'm driving back from Poplar Bluff," I replied. "Don't go home. Your source may have been followed," Dad warned. "Come here with the information. We'll scan it and I'll forward it to an organization known for protecting whistleblowers. You'll need to decide who to trust with this information, someone who can't be corrupted." I headed straight to my father's place, where we scanned the documents into his computer. After reviewing them himself, my dad spoke aloud. "This is incredibly damaging. It reveals that the drug company's claims to the authorities were false. They were testing a mind-altering drug for the Pentagon and instructed certain upper management to administer it to unknowing subjects," my dad summarized grimly. "Doug Drysdale's reports on the 6 female subjects he chose over the past 2 years prove they were essentially his unwitting sexual slaves. Despite retaining their personalities, they would unquestioningly obey commands. If instructed to forget their actions, they would comply." My dad uploaded the file to Wikipedia and submitted it. He also printed out a copy of the file. I researched the address of the police station and prepared a new envelope for Detective Benton, wearing surgical gloves to handle the freshly printed documents. Using the gloves, I carefully placed the copies into the self-sealing envelope. Dad allowed me to use his postal meter to apply the correct postage. "Tell no one, drop the envelope in a mailbox without cameras," Dad instructed. "Wikipedia won't release the information until their legal team reviews it. Just remember to wear surgical gloves when handling it. We don't want anyone to know we had access to these documents." The issue with Wikipedia is that although the files show this program started and was funded by the federal government during Obama's presidency, they may unfairly blame Trump. Dad then copied the file onto a USB stick and securely deleted it from his computer using a cleaner to ensure no traces remained. We took the original documents to the fireplace and burned them. Finding a mailbox seemed impossible until I decided to drop it off under cover of darkness. Parking my car a block away, I left the package in a bustling area without surveillance. Fiona greeted me at the state park with the widest smile I had ever seen. As I changed into hiking boots, we chatted about various topics. "Mom says Elizabeth's stress levels have significantly reduced thanks to her new relationship with your sister," Fiona mentioned. "Katie and Sophie, like all children, are beginning to become close friends. It's really helping Sophie come out of her shell." "Has my sister introduced Elizabeth to the local support group yet?" I inquired. "I'm not sure. If I hear anything, I'll let you know," Fiona replied. I retrieved my camera bag, containing my Canon EOS camera designed for capturing detailed and stunning photographs. I loved its ability to take close-ups and unique shots. We embarked on our hike, pausing for photos and discussing the flora and fauna surrounding us. One of my favorite shots was of a ladybug preparing to take flight from a flower petal. I made sure to capture Fiona in various settings, especially showing her determination during challenging parts of our climb or descent. Throughout our journey, we immersed ourselves in conversations about the natural world. By the time we returned to our cars, it was nearly 4 in the afternoon. What was intended as a 1 to 2 hour hike had stretched into nearly 6 hours. Yet, throughout our time together, we didn't discuss the circumstances that had initially brought us together. Fiona observed as I opened the trunk and placed my camera bag inside. Retrieving a small cooler, I asked if she had time for cheese, crackers, and white wine. Upon her agreement, I handed her the basket and closed the trunk. Setting everything on a nearby picnic table, I unpacked a tablecloth, a cutting board, a knife, 4 types of cheese, and 3 types of crackers. Over the next hour, we shared stories and learned more about each other's journeys in life. Before parting ways, Fiona thanked me for the wonderful day and kissed me tenderly on the cheek. Around 7 in the evening, I arrived home and was surprised to find my supervisor, Lucas, sitting on my front step waiting for me. "Hey Lucas, what's going on?" I greeted him casually. "We need to discuss what Michelle Drysdale gave you," Lucas said with seriousness. After letting us into the house, we headed to the kitchen and grabbed cold beers. Colin, Michelle's father, is in upper management. He's the head of human resources for the entire USA, Lucas explained. She met Doug through him. She knew that Doug's Thursday night meetings weren't what she was led to believe. "I need your word that you'll keep her name out of this." "Don't worry, Lucas. The information is no longer in my possession. We scanned it into a computer before destroying the original file," I reassured him. "We uploaded the file to Wikipedia, where it will take at least a week before they release it. We also printed a copy and mailed it to Detective Benton in a new envelope, ensuring no fingerprints by using surgical gloves. Afterward, we wiped the hard drive with bleach cleaner. The original file and envelope were burned in the fireplace." Lucas grinned broadly as he spoke. "I told Michelle you'd handle this in a way that no one could be held accountable. Thanks for proving me right." "You're welcome," I replied. "Does Michelle know you're in love with her?" "Yeah, and so does her dad," Lucas said, dialing his cell phone. "I need to inform him of everything that's been done." I listened as Lucas explained the situation to Michelle Drysdale's father. Things became interesting when Lucas activated the speaker so I could hear Mr. Levine's response. "Mr. McBride, thank you for your professionalism in handling this sensitive situation on behalf of the corporation and personally for me," Bart Levine said. "Many of us in upper management have been troubled by what was done to innocent people to fulfill a government contract. On Monday, we'll announce Lucas's promotion to Doug's former position. I'm offering you his position if you want it." "I accept the position, but really, I should be thanking all of you because this ensures that Doug will be held accountable for a long time," I said gratefully. "I'll need suggestions on how to manage this with our customers once it all becomes public. There will be a lot of questions, and how we handle it will minimize potential sales losses. The right approach will make all the difference. I expect it will be about a week before it's released online." "Wow!" Bart exclaimed. "Has Colin always approached his sales territory with such logic, Lucas?" "Yes, he has. That's why when you offered me Doug's position, I recommended Colin," Lucas replied. "Then we have our work cut out for us," Bart replied thoughtfully. "I'll convey my concerns to marketing first thing in the morning about what's going to blow up. Colin, Lucas will fill you in on the new position's salary and benefits." "Thank you, gentlemen, and good night." Lucas and I stayed in the kitchen a while longer, enjoying a couple more drinks. Anything work-related could wait until tomorrow. I would be working half-days all next week as Lucas trained me for the new role. A weight had been lifted off everyone's shoulders, and I felt reassured working with like-minded colleagues. Just as I was about to call it a night, my cell phone rang. It was Jeannie, wanting to talk in person. I agreed to visit her at the hospital the next afternoon. Let's take a little break. If you like stories like this, then subscribe to my channel. Continuing the story. I arrived at our regional office around 8 in the morning. Lucas was already there, and over our first cup of coffee, he briefed me on the substantial raise I was receiving as the new sales manager for the region. The bonus structure was impressive, and I understood Lucas's drive and expectations for the sales team. Given the choice, I opted for an annual car allowance rather than a company car, seeing how little Lucas used his. The head office had allocated more sales reps than we currently had on staff. With the help of an office assistant, we began redesigning routes and optimizing our coverage area. Utilizing data, I discovered we hadn't been servicing over 800 walk-in clinics in our territory. Since our reps only visited the office once every 3 weeks, we scheduled visits to these spots between 4 and 6 in the evening. Part of my new responsibilities included negotiating annual pricing with hospital administrations for the coming year, which meant more networking and entertaining than I was accustomed to. By lunchtime, my assistant and I had a proposal to streamline our division ready for review by the corporate office. If approved, Lucas would need to hire 2 additional staff members, including one to replace me. The revamped routes were designed to reduce each driver's daily mileage by an average of 150 miles, resulting in substantial fuel savings and more time for customer visits. It also minimized the need for reps to be away from their families regularly. In our proposal, I recommended that route updates and reviews become a company-wide practice at least once every 2 years. At 2 p.m., I entered Jeannie's hospital room. She was now sitting upright on an air-filled plastic ring. I had asked her father to accompany me to keep things civil. It was clear her mind was foggy. All she could recall was seeing him show up every 6 weeks like clockwork. When her father presented the factual details, she struggled to comprehend how she could have let it happen. She informed us that doctors had confirmed she was 3 months pregnant. We agreed that DNA tests were necessary before discussing anything further. As we left the room, her father expressed suspicion that she might be lying. I cautioned him against jumping to conclusions. Keep an open mind for now, I advised. Do you believe that? He asked. I'm filing under irreconcilable differences, not for adultery, because trust is what's being shattered more than anything else, I explained. My father-in-law seemed to understand my perspective. On Wednesday, when I stepped into my new office, I received the news that corporate had approved our proposal. Lucas mentioned he had attempted this before, but it was the way we framed the financial benefits that made it convincing to them. You delivered increased productivity, cost reductions, and expanded exposure. That's a home run with the bases loaded. I took a moment to arrange for a dozen yellow roses and a vase from a florist, which I had delivered to Detective Benton's office. The accompanying card thanked her for her friendship. Apparently, she received them during a serious phone call with the DA and texted me her gratitude as soon as she could. Flowers are beautiful, thank you. Dinner at 8 at Red Lobster? I replied, sounds good to me. I'll make reservations. Before leaving for the day at 1 p.m., I spoke with Tony, who had been assisting in the office. Tony, I'll officially step into the role of sales manager starting next week. I'd like to offer you the position of my executive assistant. Tony smiled brightly and accepted eagerly. Tony, since all our sales reps have GPS, let's conduct a comparison test over the next 3 days, I continued. We'll analyze their stop times using the data against the GPS records. This could reveal discrepancies that I can address in our upcoming sales meeting next week. You're not planning to dismiss anyone, are you? Tony asked with concern. No, I'm not. I understand everyone has been dealing with a lot, I reassured her. Discovering what I did was merely a catalyst. I want to use it as a learning opportunity and encourage open communication. I had no idea, Tony admitted. I'm even more impressed with you now. This also gives us a chance to discuss the new routes and our proposed 4.5-day work week to allow for paperwork catch-up every Friday, I added. I want to emphasize that weekends and evenings should be dedicated to family time, not work catch-up. Will I be included in the meeting? Tony asked in surprise. I believe an assistant should work with me, not under me, I affirmed. When I'm unavailable to make decisions, your judgment will be respected. Anyway, I'm off for now. See you tomorrow. Tony wore a smile that stretched a mile across her face. To her, I had just offered the biggest promotion of her life. Before leaving, I swung by Lucas's office to update him on appointing Tony as my assistant and outlined her new responsibilities. Lucas paused thoughtfully, then summoned his secretary, Sherry, who had moved up with him. He explained her new title and the authority that came with it. Sherry, let me be clear. If I'm not available and Colin needs approval or disapproval, it's up to you to act on my behalf, Lucas instructed. Whatever decision you make, I'll stand behind it completely. You'll be fully involved in every aspect of my role. We're all on a learning curve for the next few months, so let's keep that in mind in our decision making. Now I need to convince Brad of this, Lucas remarked. Tell him the truth, that since marketing hasn't given us any cover from the media storm that's coming, you and I have devised this new program to protect our sales team and their families, I suggested. Our focus as a sales team is on safeguarding our staff and their families, ensuring that what happened never occurs again. Lucas chuckled. You're pushing the right buttons. If this works, you'll climb the ladder faster than anyone I know. Just then, a message popped up on my cell phone. I checked it, wearing blue jeans tonight if that's okay. I replied, sounds good to me, then called the restaurant to secure reservations for 8. Lucas noticed my expression. Judging by that smile, the message you just got must be good news, since you're booking a restaurant. Just a dinner date with a friend, I replied casually. If it's Detective Benton, watch out, she sees you as marriage material, Lucas teased with a chuckle. When I met her to confirm your checkout time, she had a lot of questions. We talked, and she already knew your marriage was over. She's impressed with how you're handling everything. On my way home, I stopped at an office supply store to pick up a frame and some photography paper. I had captured a radiant moment of Fiona's face as she looked up at me, just after she had slipped and recovered during a tricky ascent. The photograph perfectly captured the brightness in her eyes, brimming with excitement and laughter in that instant. I printed an 8x10 photo and used the paper cutter to trim the edges. Then I slid it into the wooden frame I had picked out, which complemented the picture perfectly. I uploaded the other images to the cloud to sell and promote as wallpapers for computer screens. Finally, I placed the framed picture in a small gift bag, hiding it with colored tissue. Fiona met me outside Red Lobster at 8, and we headed in together. She noticed the gift bag but said nothing. I ordered the ultimate feast while she chose shrimp scampi. I let her pick the wine, and she thoroughly enjoyed their cheese biscuits. We both had salads. While waiting for our food, I handed her the gift bag. Watching her eyes light up with excitement was delightful. It's beautiful. I don't think I've ever seen a picture that captures me better, Fiona said. Could you make another copy? Sure, it only takes a minute. Why? I asked. I want to give my parents a copy of this, Fiona replied. If I don't, they'll just steal this one from me when they see it. Do you want me to put it in a frame for you, or would you prefer to do that yourself? I asked. The photograph will be enough, Fiona said. My mother would replace the frame with one that suits her taste anyway. During dinner, I informed Fiona of my promotion effective next week. She asked if it was worth it, and I explained the benefits. I mentioned that the only thing I wouldn't miss was all the driving. I talked to Jeannie for the first time, I explained. Her dad was present, and she remembers nothing about the time she was with Doug. Her father feels she's lying, but I'm not so sure. We both learned that she's expecting, so we'll be getting a DNA test done. In relation to that, tell your soon-to-be ex-father-in-law to watch for a DA press statement on Friday, Fiona said. It will explain a lot of things to both of you. I'll get her statement tomorrow. That's also when charges will be announced. I asked if she wanted dessert, and she said no. After paying the bill, she followed me back to my place. We went into the home office where I printed and cut another copy of the picture, then put it into an envelope for her. I showed her where I sold my pictures for wallpapers and took her upstairs to show her the freshly repaired master bedroom, including the replaced rug. Fiona seemed impressed. I told Jeannie to come in after she's released to get what she wants from the house. Afterward, I'll change the locks and the alarm code, I said. You haven't reordered a mattress set for the bed. Why? Fiona asked. I'm hoping Jeannie will take it, as I will never sleep in it again, I replied. If not, I'll call the Sally Ann to come and get it. Sally Ann, she asked, puzzled. It's a nickname for the Salvation Army, I explained. My family has always sent them items to sell. I guess you could call it a family tradition. She picked up the envelope and headed toward the front door. I followed her. She turned toward me, and I leaned in to kiss her gently on the cheek. With that, she slipped out the door. The next morning, I was at work waiting for Lucas when he walked through the office door. I had already made the first pot of coffee. "What did Bart say?" I asked. "Haven't heard a word yet." "I don't think they're going to go for it," Lucas replied. "Text him if you can. Just say DA going public Friday." I suggested. "Maybe that will get corporate off their butts." Lucas looked at me with questioning eyes. "Detective Benton?" "Yes, but it's not detective anymore, it's Fiona," I replied. "We are becoming friends." "That's how it started with Michelle," he said as he sent the text message. Lucas's cell phone rang almost instantly. Before answering it, he said it was Bart. He had told the marketing division to be prepared, but they had laughed it off. Lucas put the call on speaker. I listened to their discussion for a while. "Gentlemen, I will be issuing a response after the DA speaks," I said. "Both of you will pretend you know nothing. Brad, if anyone asks on Monday, you can tell them you talked to me and I said what I said to buy corporate time to come up with a plausible response." "Saving our asses once again, Colin," Brad said. "But how are you going to pull that off?" "Easy. I'll be in the crowd listening to the DA when he holds the press release," I said. "Okay, gentlemen, you both got your executive assistants as a pilot program," Bart said. "For 1 year, and then a final decision will be made based on the results." Lucas looked at me and smiled. Then he said goodbye and ended the call. "Well played. Are you sure you can pull it off?" "1 minute, let me make a call," I said. I went into my office and called a personal friend who worked at the local TV station. After explaining what I knew, they said it would be a perfect situation to be milked by the media. They promised to inform me when the press was notified about the event. I went to Lucas's office door and said, "It's all set up. Let's make the announcement to the office staff today." Lucas walked out of his office and addressed the staff, explaining the elevated positions of our former assistants and my assumption of the sales manager role for the region. He emphasized that the restructuring of the office and the sales routes was a response to recent events. Both Colin and I believe these changes will enable our staff to focus more on their families during their private time, rather than catching up on incomplete work. These measures are to ensure that what happened never happens again. When I left at 1 that day, it was clear there was a new excitement in the air. It was quite a sight seeing Fiona stand beside the district attorney as he revealed the findings of the investigation into Doug Drysdale. All 6 of the women had been given mind-altering drugs, believing they were testing a new type of birth control pill. The charges against Doug were finally revealed. If convicted, he would be gone for a long time. I stood at the entrance to the room, dressed casually as I would for the weekend. Fiona finally noticed me, and a smile spread across her face. The media frenzy had been ongoing for about an hour when I walked in. Once I was spotted, I was asked if I had anything to say. I clarified that I was not speaking on behalf of the corporation, but as a representative of the regional staff. I explained the change in management structure at the regional office and the appointment of 2 female assistants to the management team. I stressed that we had redone our sales routes and hired additional sales reps to ensure that something like this could never happen again in our regional office. As a result, our sales staff should be home every night. For us in the regional office, the family structure of our staff is important. We will have a united focus on protecting the moral values of our employees, I said. After the dust settled, Fiona took my hand and led me over to the district attorney. I congratulated him on the insight and truths he revealed. He said, "You tactfully showed wisdom in protecting the regional office while leaving corporate out to dry." I replied, "I am just an employee, at least until Monday, and maybe less than that." The DA said, "If you lose your job because of this, believe me, you will have one twice as good by the end of the week. Anyone seeing this on national TV will want you on their team. You showed yourself to be a master of diplomacy." "Thank you for the compliment," I replied. The whole time, Fiona's hand remained firmly in mine. As I walked her to her car, she said, "I gave Mom the photograph last night. She thought, like I did, that it was the best picture of me she had ever seen. Both of my parents want to take us out for dinner as soon as I can arrange it." I laughed and said, "But I'm still married." "In name only," Fiona replied. "I saw you throw your wedding ring in the garbage that Thursday night because the love you had for her died. I'll be here until you're ready to start loving again." "Best call your mother and arrange that dinner then," I said, just before I kissed her on the lips for the first time. Fiona called her mother. It made me laugh to hear her mother squeal in delight. They decided on an expensive restaurant in the casino at around 8 o'clock. The last time I had gone there was when it first opened, and we all thought it was a bust. Jeannie texted me to let me know that her family would be helping her move what she wanted out of the house on Saturday. I said I would make sure I wasn't around, giving her the freedom to decide for herself without arguing with me. I followed Fiona to her rental house. It was nicely kept, and she had 2 female cats. While waiting for her to change, I went in and changed the message on my answering service to say, "I need some downtime. If it's an emergency, send me an email, otherwise, leave a message and I will get back to you tomorrow." Little did I know how much uproar that message would cause. If anyone actually listened to it, they would realize I wasn't going to respond until tomorrow, regardless. The DA interview made national news. My non-denial of the events discussed by the DA, along with the revelation of the programs put in place to protect the regional office staff, raised many questions. Especially when it was discovered that my soon-to-be ex-wife was one of the victims used in the unauthorized human trials. Surprisingly, dinner at the casino's upper-class restaurant was better than the last time I tried it, but it still wasn't worth writing home about or the price. For a Friday night in Cape, a restaurant not being busy spoke volumes. Mr. and Mrs. Benton had seen the interview on the local news at 6 and had all sorts of questions. They agreed with my view of what trust was. Mrs. Benton couldn't stop talking about the photograph I had taken, which was now just one of many in the hallway leading up from the first floor. After dinner, Fiona's parents headed into the casino to play some slots. They asked us to join them, but I declined, saying that my mother used to spend a lot of evenings there, and I didn't want to be reminded of her. Fiona and I left them and went for a walk along the flood wall in downtown Cape on the edge of the mighty river. We were lucky to see a paddle wheel tour boat docked for the night. During that walk, I explained my mother's history and her impact on all of us who were still living, not sparing any detail. If Fiona asked any questions, I answered them. "Your father set a high bar of sacrifice and standard for you as a father to follow," Fiona said. "He put raising you and your siblings above everything else. What will you do if Jeannie's baby is yours?" "That's no longer an issue," I said. "The medication she was on caused her body to self-abort. The doctors believed that the diet she had to follow in the hospital and the medication she had been on for so long, thanks to Doug, made it impossible for her body to support a pregnancy." "Oh God," Fiona said, "can this mess get any worse?" Her life is ruined, and so are the lives of every other woman involved with Doug. Most of them are going to end up in divorce. Their civil suit will be worth millions. What we still need to find out about that drug, I said with urgency, is what are the side effects and the long-term consequences. Fiona looked at me as if I'd hit her with something of major importance without warning. Gathering her thoughts, she asked, "What are you thinking?" In World War II, Hitler's scientists were trying to create a super race. Some of the drugs they tested caused their subjects, usually Jews, to commit suicide, I explained. Some did it after taking the drug for long periods and then being weaned off, others while still taking the drugs daily. "When we get back to my house," Fiona replied, "I'm going to email the DA about your concern and why. It's a question he needs to find the answer to fast." It was almost 11 when I took her back to her home. She invited me in, but I declined. It was just too soon for any serious romance. I had just climbed out of the shower and was getting dressed that Saturday morning when my cell phone rang. It was Lucas, and the situation had escalated. Corporate was in a panic. They were upset that marketing had not taken human resources concerns seriously. My statement, made to protect the regional office, had been heard company-wide. Research and development were in major trouble. What they had been doing had never been approved. Heads were going to roll. Brad had been praised for his handling of the situation by approving the changes we had made. After looking at my original proposal in detail, the board of directors saw the value in taking it further and decided to apply the changes we had made North America-wide. I said, the board of directors is going to hang the research department out to dry over this, claiming it was rogue staff working behind the scenes. Colin, the local DA, is holding another press release. Any idea what he's going to say? Lucas asked. He's going to be asking for details on the side effects of the drug they were testing, I said. Most likely linking it to World War II and Hitler's quest to make a super race. The profanity that came out of Lucas's mouth was astounding. He came up with some I'd never heard before. Wikipedia, no doubt, is monitoring what is going on, I said, via the liberal mass media. The information being requested will only fuel the direction they will go with it. I better make Brad aware of this, Lucas said. After all, as soon as Michelle's divorce is done, we will get wed. Tell Brad to advise the board to find out who all was receiving these test drugs and suggest they move on making out-of-court settlements with non-disclosure agreements. If they don't take a proactive stance, it's going to bury them, I said. Wikipedia will turn this into a political event, using it as a marketing tool to gain further donations by fueling a frenzy of hate against Trump. Lucas started to respond, but I had another call coming in. I told him I'd call him back. It was Jeannie's father. She was back in the hospital after a suicide attempt. The chances of her coming out of the drug-induced coma she had put herself in were slim. Her body was slowly shutting down, and she was now on life support. I asked who the admitting doctor was, and he told me. I spent the next hour explaining to the doctor what he might be dealing with. He said they were beginning to run tests to see if there was any brain activity. I called Fiona to let her know what was going on. 15 minutes later, she pulled into my driveway, refusing to leave my side for the rest of the weekend. I finally got to taste her cooking for the first time. Monday was hectic. I started the day with a group call to all our sales reps, introducing Tony and explaining our new procedures. Then, I called the 5 other reps whose wives had been victims to inform them about the medical steps they should take. When they heard about my ex's attempted suicide and her current condition, they took my advice seriously. I told them to take the day to find the help they needed. I must have looked drained when Lucas walked into my office 3 hours later. The good news is that we were the only office in North America involved, he said, sitting down. 2 other locations were found, one in Argentina and the other in Georgia. A team of lawyers is already in the air to deal with the victims and their families directly. Those involved at the corporate office in Vienna have been turned over to the Swiss authorities. I just nodded. Jeannie's father and I had a long discussion. The doctors discovered she is brain dead. I'm going to pick him up, and we're going to authorize them to pull the plug. I'll stay at the hospital with him until Jeannie takes her last breath. Lucas watched me get up and leave. After I was gone, he gathered the staff to inform them of the situation. Then he walked into his office, closed the door, and called Detective Benton to inform her as well. At 4 p.m. that Monday, Jeannie was declared dead. Her father and I agreed to a cremation with a memorial service. Her ashes would be buried in the family plot in a private ceremony. Early Tuesday morning, the charge of murder was added to Doug Drysdale. On Wednesday, I surprised everyone by returning to work. Tony and I were busy preparing for the sales meeting on Friday. I informed everyone that Jeannie's memorial would be held at the Potter House on Saturday at 1 in the afternoon, where my father-in-law was a respected member. When corporate lawyers contacted me about my wife's situation, I directed them to deal with my father-in-law, emphasizing that any settlement should be split 50-50. When he asked why, I told him, she was your daughter longer than she was my wife. Your loss is greater than mine. When I walked into the sales rep meeting on Friday morning, I received a standing ovation. I started by acknowledging the recent disruptions and then shifted the focus to business. I pointed out discrepancies between GPS data and sales reports from a few reps. I said, if you fudge reports and get caught, Tony or I will fire you. If something comes up and you need to adjust your schedule, pick up the phone and call us. Keep us informed. If we know about it when the higher-ups question us, we can explain and cover for you. Then I turned the floor over to Tony. Tony, it's all yours. She nailed the presentation, explaining the new routes, reporting system, and bonus structure. She highlighted the success of our walk-in clinic strategy and how thinking outside the box had contributed to my promotion as the youngest sales manager ever. The reps were excited about the changes, especially since it meant more time with their families. The Potter house did a nice job with the service. Bart Levine and his wife attended, as did Michelle and Lucas, Fiona and her parents, all the sales reps, and their significant others. The DA and his wife, along with most of Jeannie's former colleagues, were also present. Those who wished to were invited back to my father's place for complimentary food and drinks. We even provided directions, and quite a few people came. During the service, I sat with Jeannie's parents and my dad. At the reception, Bart Levine handed me an envelope. "This is from the board of directors, a thank you for how you've handled things. Your quick actions allowed the corporation to defuse the situation, buying us time to minimize the publicity. We're covering the medical costs for the sales reps and their wives for life and have agreed to a cash settlement." Fiona met my father, Sean McBride, my sister Karen, her husband David, and their daughter Sophie. Everyone noticed how close she stayed to me all afternoon. My brother, who is in the Air Force, couldn't make it. After everyone left, I finally relaxed and had my first drink. Fiona brought me a plate of food and said, "You need to eat something because knowing you, you haven't had anything all day." "How do you know that?" my dad asked. "Colin always eats better when he's relaxed," Fiona explained. "With what he's been dealing with these last few weeks, it was easy to figure out." My sister, always the curious one, asked, "Okay, Fiona, how did you meet my brother?" With a sparkle in her eyes that showed her feelings about me, she said, "I got called out on a Thursday night because dispatch believed there might have been a shooting. The first time I met your brother, he was sitting on his couch in handcuffs with a smile on his face." "Colin, was she the detective that was investigating it all?" my sister asked. "Yes," I said. By the end of that first weekend, we had started to become friends. With what we both have been dealing with, it has drawn us closer. So, to satisfy your curiosity, we are both interested in seeing where this might go. Karen, Colin was at my parents' place when he called you about Elizabeth and her granddaughter. I had pushed him to come so he wouldn't dwell on questions for which there were no answers, Fiona said. It was watching him interact with Katie that made me want to get to know your brother better. Our region had just completed the best 2 quarters it had ever had. Overall, the growth coming out of the area had been in the top 100 worldwide. We had a lot of things to be pleased with. My ex-father-in-law had been able to retire early. The settlement we signed off on, even after splitting with me, had set him up for life. Doug Drysdale's trial was over, and he was found guilty on all counts. I had sold the house with the furniture in it and moved in with my dad. The 2,000 shares I had been given by the board of directors were in a box at the bank. Fiona and I were still together. Her birthday was on Sunday, and her parents were hosting a birthday party at their house. This time, my whole family would be attending, even my brother John, who was home on leave. It was a joy to watch Fiona open her birthday gifts one by one. I stood back, not saying a word. It was funny to hear whispers that I didn't have anything for her, and everyone was wondering why. Just as Fiona was about to thank everyone for the wonderful gifts, I walked over to where she was standing and stopped her in her tracks. "Fiona, you told me you would wait for me until I was ready to fall in love again." "I don't know when it happened, but I did," I said as I got down on one knee and took the ring box out of my pocket. "Fiona, will you marry me?" Fiona was as stunned as everyone else, except for one, because we hadn't even discussed it. Thankfully, she said yes. We sealed the deal with a very public, sensual kiss. The birthday party became a bigger celebration for both of us. Later, we were back at her rental unit celebrating in our own way. We were getting hot and bothered, and I had started to undo buttons when she said, "It's cold showers for both of us because I'm not on the pill." Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel not to miss new videos.